Good morning and a very hearty welcome to modern philosophy classes. And today we are going to start with George Berkley. And I just remind my brothers, students, that we are with empiricism. General introduction to empiricism was over, and then we completed the most important philosopher called John Locke. And having completed John Locke, we enter into George Berkeley. Berkeley, Berkeley, 1685 to 1753. 1753. So as usual, may I request all of you just to get ready with the introductory part of it, because where is he born, how was he educated, and his growth, and then most important works. That is something very important and you should have it. Well, having said that, we directly enter into the, one is in introduction. Second point is really epistemology. Okay. Epistemology. Introductory part is, is your homework. You are supposed to do that exercise by yourself. Yes. Okay. Epistemology. Well, in order to understand Berkeley as well as Hume, you need to know very well the philosophy propounded or proposed by John Locke. So, and that's why I took more time to explain his epistemology, his theory of knowledge. Yes, epistemology is something very important. In order to understand Berkeley and Hume, well, we need to know thoroughly well epistemology of John Locke. So, well, to understand this, his George Berkeley's epistemology, you need to know John Locke. Well, you remember, experience is a source of knowledge, experience is twofold, external, internal, and all that clear. Yes, external you get through the five senses, and internal is called reflection. Yes, thus you form simple ideas, and mind is capable of converting that simple ideas into complex ideas, and all that I have explained. And then he makes a distinction between primary and secondary qualities. Primary qualities and secondary qualities, Again, primary qualities means that which you find in the thing itself, and the secondary qualities that which the perceiving subject, namely color, smell, taste, etc. are called secondary qualities that depends on the perceiving subject, means of the, and then primary qualities are found in the thing itself. Shape, follow, one is shape, and then extension, motion, solidity, these are primary qualities, and color, taste, smell, etc. are secondary qualities. That is what is the official position of John Locke. Okay? So the primary and secondary qualities distinction made by John Locke. Now, that being the very basis for Berkeley to speak. And that's why you remember, thought, thinking about itself. I said in the beginning, as we started our classes. And so now the immediate resources or sources or materials available for Berkeley is the so-called, the distinction made by John Locke, namely the distinction between the primary qualities and secondary qualities. And now we are carefully listen. He said secondary qualities are depending on the perceiving subject. Okay, depends on the subject who perceives. The smell, color, taste and all. But the primary qualities are in the things themselves. Okay, namely shape, solidity, extension, size, figure. Very, very carefully move. So, imagine that is a distinction. Now, Berkley simply calls into question the validity of this. He says, there is some problem with this. What is the problem? Problem is simple, he said. Well, if secondary qualities are depending on the perceiving subject, carefully go. If the secondary qualities are depending on the perceiving subject, in other words, the eye who perceive it feels the smell of it, taste of it, and then the color of it. Okay? Berkley says, the primary qualities are also depending on the perceiving subject. It is you who see the size, shape, extension, motion, solidity of something. So, this distinction is invalid according to him. He reduces primary qualities also to the status of secondary qualities. In other words, such a distinction doesn't hold good or is not valid because everything is depending on the perceiving subject. It's you who see also the smell, get the smell, color, taste of it at the same time. Also, it is you who see the extension, motion, solidity, figure, size of a reality. Think nicely, you will get. And thus, he denies the primary quality. That's the first point. Denial of primary qualities. That's the first point. So, he denies. You see how each philosopher is depending on the other philosopher and how he makes use of the distinctions made by the former one. So, there is denial of primary qualities. Okay, one point. The second point is, yes, if primary qualities are also reduced to the secondary qualities, okay, in other words, if secondary qualities are depending on the perceiving subject, primary qualities are also, according to George Berkley, depending on the perceiving subject. Therefore, a revolutionary idea is coming. For a thing to exist, someone has to perceive it. You get the meaning? For a thing to exist, let it be anything, someone has to perceive it. Therefore, the second idea. Esse est percipi esse est percipi, P-E-R-C-I-P-I. Esse est percipi means to be is to be perceived. Drawing a natural conclusion from the denial of primary qualities. These both are one according to George Berkley. Therefore, a thing to exist means To exist means, yes, to be perceived. This is something very, very important. So, in other words, yes, he denies the primary qualities because the secondary qualities are depending on the perceiving subject. If then the primary qualities are also depending on the perceiving subject. That is the first point, namely the denial of primary qualities. And thus, immediately he jumps into the second point, esse est percipi. To be is to be. Esse means yes. To be, est is percipi, to be perceived. Well, it's causing a great trouble also for the students of philosophy. How it is? Yes, as we enter into the next stage, you will understand. Now, everything is depending on the perceiving subject. Now, which subject? Who is this subject? Is the question to be answered. And that we will see as we perceive, as we proceed further. So first, we will go into that and then the second part of it. So, in the epistemology, what is all important is the epistemology. The first point is the denial of primary qualities. Second one is esse est percipi. To be is to be perceived. Okay. Well, we now go into the matter. Okay. The first point, denial of primary qualities. Berkeley directs his attack on Locke's illogical division. Yes, he calls it illogical. Not logical, because if there is a division, the division should hold good. It doesn't hold good here. So, Berkeley directs his attack on Locke's illogical division of primary and secondary qualities. Berkeley is in full agreement with Locke when he admits that the secondary qualities such as color, taste, smell, etc. have no independent existence, means they don't exist independently of the perceiving subject. Okay, that they are the result of our senses. So in other words, that are the result of the perceiving subject. So that is the first point. Okay, but Berkeley disagrees with Locke's view that primary qualities such as size, figure, extension, motion, solidity do not exist independently of us, and they are not the result of our senses. So in other words, they exist in themselves. You perceive the color, shape, etc. So that is the point. Therefore, according to Berkeley, there is no need to make such an distinction. Berkeley logically points out that as the secondary qualities differ with different people. Color to the colorblind, sound to the deaf. He says that what appears hard to one may appear soft to another. So in other words, all this. Hence, the division of primary qualities as something objectively existing in the object independently of the perceiving subject, and secondary qualities are something subjective is not right. I will repeat that sentence once again. Hence, the division of primary qualities as something objectively existing in the object independently of the perceiving subject, and secondary qualities are something subjective, means depending on the perceiving subject, is not correct. So he denies the primary qualities. In other words, he denies primary qualities doesn't mean that primary qualities are not existing. Primary qualities are existing. Primary qualities are also depending on the perceiving subject. So in other words, this distinction is done away with. It reduces primary also into the secondary. That is the first point to be noted. Okay. The primary qualities are as relative as the secondary, and nothing exists independently of us. That is the argument of George Berkley. So in other words, exactly as the secondary qualities are depending on the perceiving subject, so too the primary qualities. So the distinction between the primary and secondary doesn't hold good according to George Berkley. The argument seems to be yes, a valid one. That could not be seen by, yes, John Locke. Well, mind you, this is a very, very important argument, and this argument holds good later. And Berkeley, being a philosopher, you will go into his life history, then you will understand. He is aiming at something else. That is, well, I need to anticipate, God as the universal perceiver. That is what we are going to come. In other words, the classroom, the recording room, the table and the chair and the rest of it. Now, when we are in the class, we perceive it. But then, when we are away, who perceives it? So, primarily, he is not worried about the thinking subject. He is worried about God as the universal perceiver. There, his arguments are correct. But then, well, we go into the matter again. We don't stop with Berkeley and Hume. We will go into Kant. Then we will bring both rationalism and empiricism into a unique transcendental philosophy. There we will get better insight, and you will understand what was the problem with the former previous thinking. Okay, whatever it is, now this is the argument. The primary qualities are as relative as the secondary, and nothing exists independently of us. That is, everything is objective only by the secondary qualities, so that we know the former only through the latter. We know the former, the primary qualities, only through the secondary qualities. So, if secondary qualities are subjective, primary qualities are also subjective. That is the argument. Okay. I cannot separate the idea of extension. Yes, I mean anyone. One cannot separate the idea of extension from the idea of color. Extension comes here. Follow. As part of John Locke, it is primary qualities. But then color is secondary. So he says, well, I cannot see the color apart from the extension. So you find the color of this fan, yes, from, you understand, you say the color of it also from the extension. It's not that extension is independent. So, you perceive, according to Berkeley, you perceive primary qualities also in and through the secondary qualities. So in other words, yes, the leaves of the fan, the color of it, yes, you find to the, yes, extension of the reality. So in other words, the color is already in the extension is already in the color. Therefore, that separation of primary and secondary qualities do not hold good according to George Berkeley. But this distinction was retained by John Locke. So that is denial of primary qualities. So that is the first point. Second one, est percipi. To be is to be perceived. Okay, that is also, let's go. Est percipi. Est percipi. To be is to be perceived. Clear? Yes, is a provocative formula of Berkley. Provocative, a troubleshooting, a difficult to understand. That's what we call a provocative. And as many will also call into question the logicality, but there is a logic in that. That's the thing. So that is how he has proved it. So, in other words, by reducing primary qualities also into the level of secondary, or in other words, you perceive primary qualities in and through secondary qualities, and thus done away with the distinction. Now he jumps into a provocative statement. What is that? Yeah, in other words, if there are no primary qualities independently of the perceiving subject, then everything is depending on the perceiving subject. Therefore, his statement, esse est percipi. To be is to be perceived. Because there are no primary qualities existing independently of the perceiving subject. So once that is denied, well, then there is only one possibility. That possibility, to be, is to be perceived. And then students should not get troubled. And that's why I gave the example. Yes, we perceived this classroom. And now the question can be, when we are away, the classroom is not there or not? That's the question. And there comes his famous statement, yes, God as a universal perceiver. Even if we are not perceiving, yes, the Amman is already perceiving. Even we are being perceived. That's the point. So, that is his famous statement. So, we'll go into that. Esse est percipi was a provocative formula of Berkley. This would mean that if something were not perceived in the negative sense, please take it. This would mean that if something were not perceived, it would not exist. Berkley was aware of the nonsense involved in this formulation. And he writes, quote, let it not be said that I take away existence. He doesn't take away existence. I only declare the meaning of the word so far I comprehend it. Yes, my students of philosophy should understand this sentence. Study by heart this sentence. What is that? Let it not be said that I take away existence. He doesn't take away existence. I only declare the meaning of the word so far as I comprehend it. Insofar as I perceive it, insofar as I understand the world and the reality in and around me, well, I need to perceive it. To be is to be perceived. A similar thought you studied also while studying the medieval philosophy, ancient philosophy and all that is. But then that was not as clear as this. But medieval fathers, they said, yes, while giving the 5 proofs for God's existence, what did they say? God as the first mover. Yes, all 5 arguments. But then in the modern philosophy, in a rationalist way, particularly the empiricist philosophers, they say, yes, to be is to be perceived. Therefore, even if we are not perceiving, things are being perceived by the Creator who created is simple. So you get the connection to your previous philosophies. So that's something. Okay. So in other words, he doesn't, very, very clear, he doesn't do away with existence. Because he cannot say that. Why? Including himself is being created. Therefore, he is not doing away with the existence. I only declare the meaning of the word insofar as I comprehend it. In other words, the perceiving subject, individual subjects as we are, as we perceive, we make the statement. As we comprehend, we make the statement. And finally, what is realism? We say that things are there. But things are there in as much as you perceive it. Think about it. That's why when you come to the modern philosophy, you get a lot of space for reflection. Follow? You don't simply say that that is there, this is there. If that is there, that's why when we come to Kant, I will show you. Yes, when do you say, how do you say, yes, that is there? In other words, conditions of the possibility of knowledge. Conditions of the possibility. Yes, you say you met me today. How do you say? When do you say? Yes, you saw me in space and time. Yes, from 11 to 11:45. Yes, I was taking class. And you can verify it. So those things will come. Yes, that is what is awaiting us. But then here you remember, he doesn't do away with existence, but only inasmuch as he comprehends. Yes, I, you, everyone. Yes, only we can speak about reality. Otherwise you cannot. Yes, you are gone asking questions. Okay. For Berkeley, the whole problem turned on how we interpret or understand the world, the word exists. Don't worry, you only just go through it now. Yes, but we will take it up later when we come to Kant. To exist means what? What are the conditions of the possibility of saying that something exists? That we will see it later. But for the moment, yes, remain with that. Okay, now the question is answered in a different way by him. So exist. The table I write on, I say exist. That is, I see, I feel. If I were in my study, I might perceive it. Or that some other spirit actually does perceive it. That's the thing. So God as the universal perceiver, that much enough. So in the same way, we never sense space or magnitude, because this very little enough for us, because much more we will see in Kant. But when you write, you make use of all these philosophers for your writing. That is your capacity. Clear? Not only simply go with only the limited, yes, dictated notes or explained notes, but rather you have a vast knowledge to do that. Okay, that is Locke's philosophy, George Berkeley's first part of it, philosophy, epistemology. So denial of primary qualities, and second one, essais percipi. Second point is, or the third division, this is I call it first point, introduction is given to you. So the third point is metaphysics of George Berkeley. It could be summed up in 3 sentences. Well, the existence of the self, existence of God, existence of the world. Yes. What do you think? Or according to John Locke, how does he speak about the existence of the self, God, world? I had already said, you have a reflexive experience of your, yes, self. You have demonstrative proof for the, yes, that is, you have sense knowledge about the world. Clear? And now, he doesn't bring in any of such proofs for God's existence, what he called proofs for metaphysical proofs for anything. But he only says, well, experience is the one. So you have the inward feeling and experiences for all these realities. Clear? So that is, well, we can, with one sentence, we can simply finish it. But then, what is all important in George Berkeley is this one. Study it. The denial of primary qualities. Distinction between primary qualities. In order to write this, you need to know how John Locke made the distinction of primary and secondary qualities. So, well, to say simply something, yes, existence, I said already, he is not worried about. Why? He is not worried about the existence. But he is more worried about how do you know that something is there. So, in other words, perception, essais percipi. So, in that way, well, in your existence, you know that you are existing. That is again, what is that? A perception of your own feelings. Yes, that's the thing. Perception of your own feelings that you exist. Clear? You move. You don't. Somebody do not have to tell you. But then, existence of the world. Yes, exactly the same. What do you have? You have finally what do you have? Let us forget about the world. Let us talk about our own parents. Simply, what do you have with you? What do you have with you about your parents? Ultimately, don't throw stones at me. My father and mother may be here, anywhere. But then what do you have ultimately? If you get, you have understood modern philosophy. In other words, you see everything. What do you have? What do I have within myself about this Vijnananilayam library? Hey, you see the figure, shapes, as I said, everything. What do you have ultimately? You have the idea. What do you know about the campus? You can write volumes, no problem. How do you write? From the ideas that you have. Reflect, you will get it. Yes, that's why I brought in your beloved parents. They are not with you, but then, yes, you know it. Now, to say the last sentence about all what we had been talking about existence, we can also say that Berkley wanted to have the knowledge of the reality. Rather than the content of reality. Yes. Knowledge, the idea, rather than the content. So that you keep it in your mind. And further, when we have the classes and further explanation we can give. But then, keep it in mind, the distinction made by John Locke, the primary, secondary qualities are done away with or refuted by George Berkeley, and to be is to be perceived. To be perceived means, yes, you have ultimately the idea of the reality. Thank you very much. Thank you.